Hi, everyone. Welcome to another live stream from Parallax Studios. My name is John McTavish, and today we're going to talk about metrics that investors love to see and expect to see from pre-seed and seed stage startups. And my guests are Michael Lapidus, who is a product manager here at Parallax, and Vitor Mortensen from Moment Holdings. Thank you guys for joining us. How are you doing today, Vitor?
Good, thank you. Warm greetings from chilly Norway.
All right, it's great to have a guest from Norway. I think it's the first time I've spoken to an investor or a founder from Norway, so I'm excited. And Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in. And I've got a slideshow to go along with what we're going to talk about today. We have 3 startups, but first, let's talk about you guys a little bit. Michael, you've been a product manager here at Parallax for a couple of years now, almost, right?
It is almost 2 years.
Yeah. And in that role, you've worked in the Midas Accelerator, which is starting up again this summer. But before that, you were with the Startup World Cup, and you were actually an analyst for a venture company. So I guess relating to what we're talking about today, what were some of the things that you expected to see from those decks that you analyzed for the pitch competitions and the Startup World Cup?
I expect to see a clear message from the company, from our startups, what they're trying to achieve, what is their product about, because most of the time, the most difficult part of analyzing is to understand what the company is doing and what they're trying to achieve, what are their core functionality and all this stuff. So this is my hopes for today, to get a clear understanding of what companies are.
Awesome. And Vitor, you've been working with Moment Holdings for how many years?
Going on 4.5 years now.
All right. And can you give us a bit of an overview about the company and what kind of startups you've invested in?
Absolutely. So pre-COVID, we had a portfolio of 21 companies ranging from high-end baby clothing through personal sun exposure wearables to offshore project management systems and salmon delousing equipment. So pretty industry agnostic. We started out with many early phase companies. Probably our best example on how we work is the salmon delousing company. Basically, 2 sailors came to our door holding a bag full of receipts and bank statements, seeking help. And then 11 months later, they were in business with the first boat in operation. And in a combined capitalization between soft funding, export guarantees, and new equity, we had raised around 5 million euros. Post-COVID, we now have a portfolio of 11 companies, and we have now shifted to companies that are a bit more mature. We are looking for companies that either are transcending into the markets or have started their journey in the markets. We have a very hands-on approach, so we work very closely with the companies that we take on board. So we spend a lot of time working with them with business development, strategy development. Luckily here in Norway, we have a very highly developed public support system for entrepreneurs and startups. So you get a lot of help with, let's say, basic business development, making your first business plan, etc. And then private actors like ourselves can then actually help the companies further when they are starting to commercialize their solutions.
All right. And when you say that moment holding is very hands-on, what are the specific aspects of the startups that you help with?
So most of the startups that come to us, they ask for money, and they're usually not very smart about how they ask for money. And they ask for money they really needed 3 months ago. And perhaps that are also some takeaways that we will be discussing throughout this webinar. So when we enter into a partnership with a portfolio company, and it really is a partnership that demands a lot from both parties, our goal is to make that particular company or business case investable. And the way we make them more investable is, of course, by looking at their financial planning, budgets, marketing plans, market access strategies. But it's also very much about helping them to relearn how they do pitching, trying to make them understand more about how investors think. And this has two effects. All of this helps them towards developing their company, and it also helps them to prepare for the next funding round, which they seldom are thinking about when they're asking for the current funding round.
All right. Well, we have 3 startups today that are targeting their next funding round. And so hopefully our insights can help them prepare in a better way. So just an overview of the startups that we're going to talk about. We have Ample, which is a Web3 streaming distribution and financing platform for films, shows, and music. It's a very comprehensive sort of solution based in Web3. Then we have 2Zero, which is a climate tech and sustainability startup. And finally, Pick Eat, which is in the restaurant tech sector, and they do table reservations. And we'll get into the details of each of these. But first, let's talk about what's going on right now in terms of funding for startups. So the glory days have kind of left us behind, as everyone seems to agree. And so it's making it harder, and it might take longer for startups to raise the funding they need. So how have you guys seen this play out? How is it affecting startups that are trying to fundraise? And Michael, do you want to take the first shot at this?
Yeah, sure. So right now there is a global crisis, you can name it, when the companies are providing massive layoffs, and currently as S&P 500 is naming this year as the most bearish year since 1999. You have different definitions of a bear market. For example, most investors follow the 20% rule when the prices are dropping down by 20%. And right now it is exactly this kind of situation in the market. And it is harder to, of course, it is harder right now to get money to raise them. and many companies are struggling in finding a new um, markets. But from the other hand, the bear market is also a certain situation in the market for opportunities when companies can gain even more than in a normal market situation. It is also depends on what companies are, on which market they are currently operating, and so on and so forth. So I would like to determine current situation on the market as a very unstable situation, but still it is a time of opportunities, I think.
All right. And Vidar, over to you. How are things in Norway and the Scandinavian market in this situation?
So I think one of the points from the Norwegian or Nordic point of view is that at least for Norway, we only just in the recent years have started to see very domain specific investors. And early stage funding in the Nordics, and perhaps especially in Norway, in Sweden, they're doing a better job. But that has been difficult for many years. Probably it's a cultural thing as well. Perhaps our investors at least have been more risk averse, putting a lot of capital typically into property. Then, of course, I would say one of the benefits of having a more bearish market is that if you're a good investor, you will see this as an opportunity. And perhaps the better cases, better business cases, business ideas will be able to stand out more than in a bull market. And here in Norway, we have a saying, the rising tide lifts all boats. So when boom times are here, I think also some startups that really don't deserve funding get it. Now, yes, it is more challenging, but then again, if you work to make your company investable, if you understand the investor mindset, and you actually have an idea that can also weather the storm in a more bearish markets, then we at least look for that, and I hope that this will benefit the better startups in the long run.
All right. So speaking of weathering the storm at the moment, are there industries or sectors that you see as more safe havens right now?
If I continue just for a bit, in our experience, we see that ideas that take a very long time to industrialize, for example, we've had some high-tech companies approaching us, and they have a go-to-market path of, let's say, 3 to 5 years. Sort of a little bit industry independent. That's a tough sell now, especially here in our region. We do see also here interest in AI, for example, and machine learning has been a buzzword here also for a long time. But then again, it's difficult for many of our investors to really understand what you are investing in. So I would say that anything that has to do with green and blue technology is very much in the wind now, no pun intended. But here we have also major national initiatives. So offshore wind, for example, also in our region, hydrogen, a new battery factory being built, also more eco-friendly alternatives to petrol. So the green eco domains are still a hot ticket here.
Interesting. And Michael, as we look forward to the Midas Accelerator this summer, obviously one of the goals of the outcomes of that is that the startups that we build are investable, that they'll be appealing to investors. So you're part of the team that sort of evaluates the startups that make it into that, and then you also work with the startups themselves throughout the accelerator. Has this sort of market shift changed what you guys are looking for when it comes to startups to go into Midas this year?
I don't think that we have really changed any approach dramatically to finding the startups. You should understand that during this period as a bear market, there are also spheres that are not very much affected. Like there is always a healthcare, gas, groceries, and all of these spheres which are always in demand. So they are not dramatically affected. But in Midas, we are first of all looking for founders. We are looking for strong entrepreneurs and people with a mindset which are mindsets which are similar to ours, trying to invest first of all in the founder and his will to shape the market and change the world for better.
All right, and I guess speaking of founders, there's a lot in the news about the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, and others, Amazon as well, who are laying off a certain percentage of their employees. Sometimes it seems rather arbitrary, depending on the news sources you read, as to how great those engineers and those people at the big tech companies are. But some people say, hey, there's a silver lining here. These guys and girls can go out and become founders. They've got a lot of experience. Now's the time to sort of go on their own way and make a startup. What other impacts do you guys see of those layoffs on the startup scene? Vidar?
So we actually had a similar experience here in the Agder region, the southern part of Norway, because for many years we were world-class suppliers of oil and offshore equipment. So deep sea drilling and everything to do with hydraulics, for example, world class. And the companies here were hiring engineers and technicians in the thousands. Then you come to 2014, 15, and almost overnight that market dried up. And then over the next years, layoffs in the thousands. Two effects. One is that startups and early stage companies finally have a fighting chance of attracting talent. where they previously were in no position to compete terms-wise. Secondly, one takeaway we saw in our region was that, and of course this is just generalizing, but engineers necessarily don't make the best founders. So I think going forward, you still need that mix of business development people, salespeople, not least, and of course you have to have very strong domain knowledge of the product or service that you're actually making. But I think it has become even more important that as a founder, you are resilient, you are mentally strong, and also you are a leader and you have to inspire the rest of the team. Yeah.
All right. One last question. If you guys want, before we get into the startups, do either of you want to take a crack at looking into the magic 8 ball to predict when this might end, when things might turn around in the market and funding will increase?
Yeah, so the recessions can last from a few weeks to several years, depending on the cause and the government responses. So as we see right now, in many countries, government is trying to balance the situation. However, it is quite unpredictable. Between for the last 200 years, the average recession lasted for 17 months. And I'm not pretty sure if we can give any adequate evaluation of how this recession long will last. But after recessions, there is also ups. So I think the market will come to normal. Maybe in the next couple of years. It is pretty hard to estimate right now.
All right, well, let's get into evaluating the startups themselves then. And if anybody's watching and they have other questions about the market or investments in general, please shoot them into the chat and I will ask these guys. So, all right, first up is Ample, which is a Web3 solution for distribution, streaming, and financing of films, shows, and music. So we're tokenizing professional level creative IP to support the future growth of the huge show business, film, and music industries. So any first impressions of the startup before we get into their current metrics? Any first reactions to that idea? Vitor?
Sorry, I was muted. Very interesting space to operate in. And as they suggested themselves, plenty of hurdles. But if you look at the entertainment industry as a whole, and the ways in which they have tried to digitize themselves over the years, you just sort of instinctively know that there are going to be huge upturns in the future. And if you can enter at this level, I think you really have a good shot at creating something big.
All right, so let's look at where they are now. So they are building and fundraising. Their core customers are professional content creators. They're at seed stage and they have onboarded 20 partners with 2.7 million followers and 416 million streams across 50 or more countries. And their hurdles mainly are legal ones. So I guess sticking to the theme of today's discussion, what are the metrics that you would expect them to highlight when pitching to investors? Vitor, would you like to go first again?
Sorry, I was just retrieving the overview of the companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, they have impressive metrics already. From my point of view as an investor, and as you can see, I'm old school. I would like to understand their metrics going forward in the short term. So having a somewhat detailed timeline, how or what their next milestones are, and also when we look behind the metrics, behind the numbers, I need to understand, for example, why 2.7 million followers is a big thing, which I understand it is. But also with investors, sometimes it seems like companies think that we are sort of demigods. We're not. We are very simple people, and we need to have simple concepts explained to us in a simple way.
All right. Michael, anything to add from your side as a product manager?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I really wanted to add that talking about projects like this, it is a very competitive sphere right now. Like a lot of companies are into Web3 and are into NFT and into tokenization and everything that is connected with the coins and cryptocurrency. So it is a highly competitive sphere. And the main metric and the main thing I would like to see is the amount of people around the project, the community. So all this NFT, Web3, all of this stuff, all these projects are surrounded with crowds, and as to my experience and as what I know, uh, companies from this sphere are successful if they are hyped, if there is people who can support it, people who can participate in their activities. Some companies even offer some sort of rewards for completing different tasks based on cryptocurrency and so on. So yeah, the very first metric would be from my side, and the thing I would expect from projects like this is a number of followers, number of users, everything that is connected to people.
All right. And we did get 2 questions from the founders of Ample that I didn't have time to add to the outline here. But the first one is, what is the single most important factor for an early stage pre-revenue company that makes investors decide to close a deal? Would you like to take a crack at that, Vitor? Single most important factor.
It's difficult to go outside of the team itself when it comes to the single most important factor. And you also had a question earlier, has there been a shift in how startups are evaluated? And I think especially here in Norway, we have a lot of startups, and many of them are started by people who aren't, in my view, proper founders. in many cases, you will have investors that are not domain experts. So you need to explain to us your domain, the problem, and we need to understand that you are a domain expert. And that translates into your ability to execute the solution into the market. Yep.
All right. And the second question from the team at Ample is, what are the questions that investors would like to receive from founders, whether that's at the pitch or throughout the raising process?
Do you have anything, Michael, while I'm thinking?
I'm not sure. It's hard to imagine if I am an investor, what I would like to ask from what I would like founders to ask me. I suppose there are like a bunch of questions that early stage founder can ask when he is in his very beginning. I suppose it would be some sort of advice of um, how do I communicate with the users more effectively, maybe how to grow the community, how should networking work properly, maybe something like this. That's from the top of my head.
I can just add some of the questions that we usually aren't asked, and we tell our companies to actually include them also in the pitch or make it part of the pitch. So again, make sure that the investor understands the domain. It usually pays not to assume too much when talking to investors. So make sure that they understand not only the domain, but also the stage you're at. And also, when it comes to market access, usually you will find that investors have very different approaches to that. And that is something that is one of the most important themes or topics in any pitch. So just make sure that you have that well covered, and that if nothing else, the investor walks away understanding what you do and how you want to enter that particular market and why.
John, I can also add here that it is very important that the problem that the startup is trying to solve is understandable and why they are trying to solve it. It is very vital for investors to understand, because this is on the problem is something on which the whole pitches and the whole startup philosophy is based. So this is, I think, pretty important.
Super
right.
important point, and it always surprises me how often companies fail in that regard. I've been to pitch sessions in San Francisco, and during a 3 or 5 minute pitch, for example, you get the whole spiel about the technology and how great it is and features. But you're absolutely right, Michael. If the investor understands and sort of feels that this is a real problem that someone would pay money to fix or to help them with, that is a major mental hook for the rest of the pitch.
All right, very good point to close on there. If we don't have anything else to say about Ample, we'll move on to the next startup. All right, we have.
I just want to, yeah, just wanted to say good luck to Ample, and they are doing a very hard thing on a very competitive market right now. So I just wanted to wish them luck.
For sure. Good point. All right. On to Pick Eat, which is a B2B software product for getting your food faster when you're at a restaurant or going to a restaurant or at an event that has a variety of sort of food stalls or food trucks. So you can use the app to make an order, prepay for a meal, save your time, show up at the restaurant, the food's ready, or at the truck and the food is ready. You can skip the line, don't have to change money when you get your food, and you're all ready to go. So any first impressions of this space, sort of the restaurant tech space, before we dive into the details of their startup and where they're at right now?
Well, I can start. Of course, it's an interesting space because there are a lot of restaurants and people like to go out and eat, and we can all relate to that feeling that they're describing. I'm very interested in discussing how that ties into the workings of the restaurants, because this will impact their operations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Certainly.
and from my perspective, I can also say that it is extremely competitive sphere, and paying attention to the domain, which is Italy. I assume that it is double harder task to succeed on this market, because in Europe there are plenty of services which offer different food services, per ordering services, booking, and all like that. So really interesting what this startup is.
All right, let's dive in. So they've got the product built and they're fundraising. They have not raised any funds before. And they had pretty good traction, used 12,000 times through web app at their first event. 22% of the orders were through their app. Events with over 100,000 people, and the app worked well via QR code. 87% positive reviews, and they have a restaurant in Rome where they're actually using it on a day-to-day basis. So the detected problems were getting investments with low revenue amounts and difficult to grow faster because they don't have the revenue. So chicken or the egg problem for this restaurant startup. So Vitor, can you start us off here? What are some of the metrics that you'd like to see them improve or execute upon in order to better raise the round that they need?
So I think one key area, and Michael, you were absolutely right. In a crowded and competitive space, when you're early stage, as an investor, I really need to understand how you separate yourselves from the competition. And I don't know if it's a metric, but we often, when we see pitches and they sort of line up the competition, they they only think of competitors as in terms of similar technologies or solutions to their own. But it's very important to put yourself in the mind of your customer, because the customer might think of other competitors as well. And if you're able to demonstrate that to an investor, I think that is something that is often overlooked, and it's closely tied to one of my major concerns regarding startups. That is, how do you measure and quantify risk? So risk as a metric. So I would be very interested here in learning more about the competitive space, and also this is metric from the end customer side. So what are the metrics from the restaurant side? Yeah.
All right, good advice there. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, for me, it is really interesting how this startup is going to make money. For example, I can see that they have a web app, and it is interesting if they are going to have the payments inside of their app with some sort of a percent going to the food restaurants, and some of the percent going to them. So the monetization question is very important here, like how they're going to make money. And also, I think that it is crucial for them to stick to the niche of events, because I think it is the most successful use case for them, as far as they already have traction in that sphere. And yeah, regarding the metrics, also a number of accesses is a key. So for now, we can see from the traction that they had like to 12,000 accesses, but it is hard to scale, I think. So it is interesting how they will perform in other events.
So we have a message from the founder via LinkedIn. They have Stripe integrated with the app, and they now have an app released on the app stores. And now they are focused on events. So your hunch was right. Events are the way they're going.
And there is an interesting add-on to that. We see now a growing attention in festivals and events to being more green. So anything that helps big events plan their food preparation better, for example, less waste. I don't know if it's applicable here, but that might be something you can sort of add on to reasons to start using this service.
All right, that's an interesting angle. Thanks for bringing that in. All right, anything else to say about Pick Eat other than good luck, guys? We all love food, and of course, at least for myself, I love Italian food. So I wish you the best of luck in the app.
Yeah, all the best to Pick It.
Definitely.
All right, last one is a green tech startup, I believe, based out of Germany. And they are empowering your sustainability goals with a gamified approach to people-driven transformation. Any first impressions from their one-liner there?
A very hyped theme in Europe. right now, I think. It is interesting how the B2B software works with the sustainability and everything that is green, I think will automatically have more attention. So yeah, looking forward.
All right. So the product is built and they are currently fundraising. They're at the pre-seed stage and they have raised funds before. They're entering into the European market. And we validated our product in 2022 with 20 plus customers and 85,000 euros in revenue. And they've translated their problem is moving that traction into success and story to investor, valuable insights and metrics. All right. So what advice can we give these guys about these people about making good on the traction they've got so far and raising their next round?
So I think here's also a case of context, because as and we see this a lot. As an investor, I need to understand how those 20 plus customers are probably a super good result. And the great thing about pitching, for example, is that you control the context. And they have a vital keyword here under the detected problems, and it's story. More often than not, the pitch that we hear is not a story. It's a collection of semi-related arguments for me to invest in your idea. So I would really make sure that this translates into a story about how that transition to a greener society is being done on a daily basis by real people using this software, and how those mechanisms can be used to scale.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I've seen several projects in similar sphere which were working with also big companies, and they used some sort of a gamification for its users, like day-to-day tasks for become more greener, and employees were like tracking the stuff in their application. And I can see that founder from 2.0 just sent us his pitch.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look through it. Do you guys want me to bring it on to the show? We can talk about it
Yeah,
right
sure.
now. All right.
Sure.
Just a moment. There we are. All right. Change as a service. I've already jumped to slide 2. So they've got some screenshots there. data-backed CSR reporting to actionable goals to engaging employees for a sustainable culture. All right. Well, I don't want to read it out to all of you guys, but we've got a GIF or a meme. All right. Looks like to me the story they're telling, just from a glance here, is they're going against sort of greenwashing. People want to act, but they seem to feel that companies are not doing it in the best way.
I like measuring the KPIs. I like it.
All right. So just quick overview from my side. It seems like KPIs, basically a company can set up with their employees to reach a sort of sustainability goals and use the app to set it up for their own company. Thoughts on the story, Vider?
It looks like they have a good progression outlining the problem, or at least the issue. And it would be very interesting to hear, well, of course, all the pitches. But I think the voiceover here would have been very interesting to hear. What I would be looking for in the story is how is the retention rate when you're using this? Because it looks like you can track a lot of metrics here, from turning out off the lights and upwards. So it could be a fun thing, or it could be a burden. And if you succeed in sort of cracking that nut, and it actually translates into changed behavior, then I would be very impressed.
All right. Michael, do you have any more impressions?
Yeah, as I mentioned, they are using some sort of a tasks, and it is interesting what are the rewards. For example, like what I will get from this app if I will follow all the stuff and completing my KPIs. So the interaction with the user here is very interesting, I think, and I suppose they found a way to interact with the user in a very funny way, I mean, entertaining way, because I also think that there are plenty of other similar projects. So it's really interesting how they stand out in communication with the user.
All right. We've got a little bit more time left. Is there anything else that you'd like to stay on, whether it is about green tech and 2.0 or about the other startups that we talked about earlier?
I think I would just summarize from my side important metrics that you actually can control in your presentation. And especially early stage, don't worry about not having all the answers, because as investors, we understand that you don't. But we're also looking for understanding how you think, what are your mental models, and do you have an understanding of the investor's mindsets, which is probably a whole webinar or a conference in itself. So going back to timeframes and milestones, it's a good thing that you're starting here, and way in the future we'll all be multi-billionaires. But as an investor, I'm very much interested in those first steps going forward. That also has the benefit of, if you have more and smaller milestones, it's easier to score wins. And as an investor, I'm really interested in seeing you progress. So that becomes an important metric in itself. And you're sort of setting you up for success because you can still prove that you are meeting the milestone metrics. Then also demonstrate that you have at least started to think about the next phase. So let's say that you're trying to secure funding for the next 12 months. Give us some indication on what's going to happen after those 12 months. Typically, would you like me to invest more, or will you be looking for a different class of investors after that? And thirdly, try to break down your risk elements and demonstrate to me that it's not only about maximizing the potential, it's also about controlling your risk metrics. Yeah.
All right. Just one quick follow on to that in terms of timeline, because we've talked about it a few times now. All of these startups that we talked about today are targeting their seed round, I think. So from your perspective, how much time would it take in the current market to sort of maybe close that round in an average or good situation? And then also, what should they be thinking about in terms of time frame for their next round?
Pertinent but difficult questions. Now, in general, we just tell companies that don't assume at least anything less than 3 months. That's almost like a general rule now. And also, when it comes to seed rounds and timeframes, what we don't want to see as an investor is that you're trying to that you're not spending money because you want to grow slowly or get into the market slowly. So this needs to be a very frank and upfront discussion between the founders and the investors on how those dynamics need to be in that particular case. So I don't think I have any more sort of general rules, but one observation is that founders are perhaps scared of talking about it, and investors are perhaps not that good at taking that founder's view. Yeah.
All right. Michael, the last word goes to you. Do you have any closing comments for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it is very unstable times right now for everyone. So it might be hard to get through different screening processes for the investors, going past the due diligence and all other steps. But I think all startups we have watched today are pretty um, have a pretty straightforward ideas and projects. So I can only wish them good luck with uh, gaining funds and fundraising, and just don't give up.
Definitely. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your advice on these startups with all the other founders out there. And if you are a founder and you're looking for an early stage accelerator program, the Midas Accelerator will start this summer, and we are already opening applications for it now. So check that out and see if we can help you build a startup that is investable and successful this year. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.